This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. And I just have to tell everybody listening that one of my favorite people walking around planet Earth is with us today, Vanessa Naff, all the way from Seattle. I can't believe all the way from Seattle. Hey, Vanessa.
Hello, gloomy Seattle.
That's because I'm not there. When I go, the sun always comes out. So I just have to go more.
That's true. We eat better as well.
I don't think I've been there since pre-pandemic. And I said this to Vanessa before we started. I literally walk around my house once a week thinking, why am I not in Seattle hanging out with Vanessa? And my other friend out there, Ian, if you're listening, I know Vanessa loves you, but I love you too, man. And I miss you. And I can't wait to get out there and hang out with you guys again. And I want to bring Ale, my wife, because she's never been to Seattle and she's got to see the city.
Her. Yeah, especially when it's sunny. Yeah, Ian is actually the person who got me into Go in the first place. So Ian's my connection to all of you.
Ian's good at making connections with people. He's very outgoing and friendly and a ton of fun to hang out with. So I believe that. Okay, Vanessa, this podcast is about you. I'm really interested in hearing your story through tech. So a couple things before we start. I'm going to have to age you a little bit, and unfortunately, because I need to kind of, what do I mean? I need to know like what year you graduated high school.
Oh God, I graduated high school in 2003, but I had just turned 17 at the time. So I was born in 86. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I graduated high school too when I was 17. So I didn't turn 18 for a few more months after that.
But, I graduated just like 2 months after I turned 17.
Okay, perfect. All right, so 2003. All right, so I've got that now. It gives us an idea of tech around, like what tech looked like and things looked like when you were 17. That's always a good sort of baseline. Okay, favorite question. Actually, I'm super interested in hearing your answer here. Now, just clear your mind, just clear it. Don't let anything like create bias here. First thought pops in your head when you remember working on a computer and it being that magical moment.
Well, it's my dad's work laptop, which was a ThinkPad, an old IBM ThinkPad with the nub touch bar. We had our touch. I guess that was the mouse controller.
It looked like an eraser head.
Yeah, it did. It was like people have different names for it, but it's a little nub essentially. There's, I think, an XKCD comic that mentions it, and the various levels of professionality of the names people give. But yeah, it was a work issued computer, so technically I probably shouldn't have been playing with it. But it booted to DOS and to MS DOS, and I read through the documentation. So when you talk about time and placing somebody in time, I also think about time and space, because I think someone my age who grew up here in Seattle has a really different connection to computers than someone my age who grew up where I grew up, which was fairly rural. I didn't see a lot of computers till I was almost a teenager. But this one, I was fascinated, and I stepped through by pages the entire documentation for how to do things, and I changed the colors and changed the prompt text and did all kinds of silly stuff. Found a pre-installed game or two, and my dad was very patient with me, but usually said, "Well, I don't know how you did that, so you need to change it back."
Do you remember how old you were? You were?
Oh, I must have been like 7 or something like that.
Okay.
It was a brick. Yeah.
But
when I was 7, it would have been,
so
been like early 90s.
He walked away from you while you were working on it and came back and said, "Yeah, I need to get that back."
Yeah, exactly. I would just change silly things and be like, look what I did. His level of curiosity was a little less than mine with that. He'd just wanted to make sure I didn't destroy his work laptop.
Yeah, because I'm sure he needed it. What did your dad do for work? Do you remember?
He's a banker. So
Okay.
he worked in a bank
Oh
as a
my
loan.
God. So you could have hacked into the bank on that laptop.
Well, I'm sure.
Instead, you're changing colors.
I think he used it mostly. I hope I'm not getting him in any trouble here. I think he used it. He's retired, but I think he used it mostly for like word processing and essentially like calculations of things that I was far too young to understand. I never actually saw any of the files in an actual file system. I was far more interested in what I could make the machine do that seemed like magic.
That's really awesome. At 7 years old, you were playing that. Was that just a one-time sort of moment, or did that fascination say continue?
Oh, good question. I was a very curious kid. I was more of a library kid, if that makes sense. Knew my favorite sections in Dewey Decimal to like beeline to in any library. And
Okay, time out. Am
I
It's gonna
aging
happen a
myself
lot.
again?
No. A little bit, but it's okay. All right, time out a second. I have two questions. One, where did you grow up at this time?
I lived in Nogales, Arizona. Nogales is on the border of the United States and Mexico. So my family lived about 10 kilometers off of the border. It's a rural area. Import-export of agriculture is the big business there, but even the town of Nogales has like 20,000 people or something like that. It's about 75 miles south of Tucson.
Wow, super small.
Yeah, it's pretty rural.
Like one school for K through 12?
Yeah, I think we had an elementary school, and they actually didn't have, well, the area that I grew up in didn't have a high school. They bused people into the Nogales area. There isn't a high school there now. That was built when I was a teenager. But yeah, it's, I remember thinking that my life was more suburban than I realized it was later. It's like, oh, we drive to the mall. It's like an hour. It's very, very normal.
It's an hour.
The movie
All right.
theater's closer. It's 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, I got questions. Okay, let me get to the other question. I want to now hear what section your favorite books were in Dewey Decimal. Do you remember that number?
Well, I don't remember the numbers, but I do remember. I do remember some of the sections. I was particularly interested in any sort of. I liked the encyclopedic sections of the library. I liked anything with history or puzzles. Like there is an entire section it's in between the mathematics and sciences sections that has puzzle books like Martin Gardner and like Lewis Carroll's logic puzzle biography and autobiography that I found interesting. But yeah, I also read a lot of fiction.
I mean, you're living in a really, I'm going to call it really rural because I grew up in
It was pretty
New York,
rural.
right?
Yeah.
Really rural area. I'm also curious how the pre high school, right? Like pre 13, 14, right before you're going to start high school. What are you reading all the time? Is you an avid reader? Are you outside playing sports? Are you playing music? Or like, how are you spending your time? Do you remember?
Yes, sort of. My dad made me join a sport because I spend a lot of time. I did spend a lot of time in books and by myself as a kid. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and so
Oldest of 4 kids, but you spend a lot of time by yourself.
yes, I spent a lot of time sort of in like a pseudo parent role with my sisters because my parents both worked. So I didn't really play very much, I think, until I was a little older. And then I was also a little bit ahead in school. So I had, just a few friends there, but I spent a lot of time reading. And at the time, oh gosh, I liked to write. I had taken piano lessons, which I enjoyed, but my sister was better than me. So that's always a little hard when you have sibling running circles around you. And what else did I do at that time?
How old is your youngest sister?
She is a senior in college right now. She's 15 years younger than me.
15. Okay. So, wow. Yeah, I have a sister who's 17 years younger than me. But at that point, you're not
it's
really
a completely
taking
different
care.
relationship.
It is a different relationship. And your parents are different too? Like
Same 2 parents. Yeah.
No,
But different time. Yes, you're right. Different time of life.
that's right. The way they parented you is 100% different than the way they parented the 15-year-old. For sure. That's what I mean by different parent.
Yes. Well, people sometimes ask because there is such a gap, and it is the same two parents, but it's they are not the same people, yes, that they were when they had me in their early 20s.
You see, so I appreciate that my sister Christy had different parents because my mom and dad, mostly my mom, was very strict, like
Hmm.
Italian, like,
Hmm.
let's just say I got hit a few times, okay? Christy, I don't think ever got hit. I have a sister who's actually a little resentful because Christy had it easier than we did, right? So, yeah, it's just it's a different thing. But you're also at that point in high school already, and that particular sibling isn't really part of your life early on. They later.
Yeah, a little bit. My mother was really excited for everyone to be able to help out at that point. We were old enough to be able to pitch in a little bit with Katie. And when she was small, I used to actually dislike taking her around in public because people often thought she was my kid. Which is, reasonable. Like she could have been, but um, I felt a need to explain to to the assumers.
It's almost like we should have gotten you a T-shirt saying "She's not mine."
She's my sister.
I can imagine you looked young too. Like I looked younger. I looked young, Kevin, when I was young. In fact, the first house I bought, I was 26 years old. And I remember somebody knocking on the door of the house, and I opened it up, and they were like, "Oh, are your parents home?" And I looked at them, I said, "I am the parent." And they
That's
felt
right.
like, and I shouldn't have been like that. Like my tone was wrong, but at the same time, I just wasn't having it that day.
We all draw on our experiences to make those guesses, and sometimes you have to be wrong.
Okay, so then as you're entering high school, like my wife doesn't like me saying this to the 11-year-old, but like whatever, until you're in high school, I don't think anything really
You're
matters unless
playing.
you're
Yeah.
trying to get into a really good high school. There's some kids that take middle school super seriously here in Miami because they're trying to get into
Right.
an elite high
Elite.
school.
Hmm.
But beyond that, things really start in high school. That 4 years starts a 4-year sort of cycle. 4 years of high school, the next 4 years, whatever that is, the next 4 years. You just you tend to be on a 4-year cycle until you're probably about 30. What are you as you going into high school, or like what's really interesting you? Are things somewhat changing around what you want to spend your free time on?
Yeah, I started high school really strong academically. That was I got along well with like older students, and I
High school had to be wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. High school had to be interesting for you because you got bused to a larger school. That there had to be some, like, I don't want to use the word fear, but some reservation early on that you're going to be around a whole set of different kids that are.
I was excited about that. I didn't have as many close people in the small rural school, um, which I know is kind of unusual. I think a lot of people do like having the same students around them as they grow. But when I was about to hit high school, I was excited to start at a new school. Being who I was at that time, I wanted to meet some new people finally for the first time in my life. And the high school I went to had a graduating class of about 500. It was pretty sizable. And I was also excited because it had more resources in terms of programs and things like that than the high school I'd been to. The library was bigger. We had an IB program. It was
So everybody that heard you say the high school had 500 people, they're
500
like,
graduating class, so it was like 2,000
okay,
or something.
500
Mhm.
and okay, 2000. Okay, that's good. That's like, okay, 2000 is good. Yeah, that's a good size. Yeah, so now you've got better facilities, bigger library, labs. It's a little bit more modern. So that's awesome. And the bus ride is
30
20 minutes, 30
minutes.
minutes,
Yeah,
30 minutes.
20,
No big
30.
deal.
Yeah.
No big deal. Tell me a little bit about high school then. Like what subjects are you excited? I'm already guessing because you love puzzles and stuff. So I'm gonna guess the sciences were cool, but you also were like into reading.
Artistic, yeah, somewhat.
Oh,
I it's funny.
you're all over the place.
No
This
one
is
has
cool.
asked me about high school in a really long time, Bill. This is going back more than 20 years now. Uh, but let's see. Okay, so when I started high school, yeah, I sort of started on their college preparatory track, which is essentially to taking courses that would allow you to have college credit and potentially qualify you for the IB diploma. IB is a program called International Baccalaureate um, that also requires you write some papers, take some tests. There's a um, an evaluation board that sits in Europe, um, and the college credit that comes from the IB program is transferable internationally to many schools as well, whereas AP is
So
in the United
you're
States.
already thinking, okay, hold on. This is gonna happen a lot. I'm sorry.
So that's fine.
Are you entering high school already in your head? Like, I got to get out of here.
I was excited to go to college. I think people had been telling me for a long time that I would be much happier in a different sort of environment. So yeah, I think I was itching to find something else out. I had been a reader for so long and had sort of secondhand seen a lot of things that I didn't get to experience in my regular day-to-day life, which is I think fairly standard. There's nothing bad about it. I lived in a rural area with two parents who worked and a big family, and their entire life is kind of within that 15-mile radius.
This is what I'm curious about. I had the same thing. I wanted to go as far away as possible, and I did while staying in New York State. I had to go to South Canada to do it, but I did. But what's interesting to me is you had a lot of responsibility at home because you were the oldest, and your parents worked, and so I'm curious. Did you feel at all like you couldn't leave, or did they make you feel a little bit like we need your help, or was it everybody understood that you were helping now because you're here, but the goal is for you to go off and do your own thing?
I think it was always understood that I was going to go do something else. My parents were really supportive. My parents were both first in their family to go to college, but my parents both went to college. My mom's a special ed teacher. My dad worked in a bank, and I remember coming home. I think this might have been my freshman year of high school. We had a seminar. We were taken out of class in the morning to the auditorium gymnasium to essentially attend like a fair where we walked around and met with people on different career track type programs. There were military, there were like trade school. There were a whole bunch of different programs available there, and we talked to a lot of people. I remember going home and telling my mother about it, and telling her that we did a thing called Alternatives to College, and my mother was like, "Stop right there."
Yeah,
She
no.
goes, for you, there are not alternatives to college.
That's funny.
I
But you
had
remember that
enjoyed,
now?
yes,
Do you
because I
remember
wanted to
that?
tell her about, because I had wanted to tell her about the seen a presentation from some like electrical and machine people that I thought was really interesting, and they had given me some information, and yeah, she was not interested. She's like, you can do any of that, once you go to college. So
Does that shape you at that point going, okay, I'm going to go to college, but I'd like to go to college for what I just saw a presentation on?
I think that I did not know yet what I wanted to do in college. I think it changed pretty regularly at that point. I had read an article about a virologist, and then I was looking into what a virology course of study would look like. What kind of like microbiology and what kind of research you would do to do something like that. And then, another day I would be learning about cryptography and be like, maybe I want to do something like that. Then I think I well, I did an exchange program in high school, where I lived in Japan for a year through the Rotary. And it was a very cool experience. But when I did that, I thought, maybe I should stick with languages and do something like translation related, you know,
You were there for a year, so you did a year of high school.
year of high school.
And how is your Japanese though?
It's good. It's almost, it may be better than my Spanish, which my family is Mexican. And my dad always gives me a hard time about that. He says, we should have sent you to Oaxaca.
To improve your Spanish.
Yeah.
You knew Japanese before you went there, or you learned it on the fly?
I don't know if it's exactly the same now, but when you apply to do that type of study through the Rotary, you rank places that you'd be interested and willing to go by their availability. And if you're accepted, they try to place you into one of your top choices. And I chose Japan specifically because at the time I thought, I have a lot of opportunities to learn Spanish and practice Spanish here. But I wanted my top choices to be places that it might be more difficult to pick up the language without that kind of immersion. And yeah, I was selected, and I lived in Nagoya, which is a very big city, but a very industrial city, on Honshu, which is the main island, for a year, and went to high school.
I'm curious if it was almost a guarantee that you would get selected, or you were just doing this like on a whim, like I'm just going to do it, but I'm never going to get selected, so this is not really a problem.
I thought I had a chance, but I definitely applied because I had wanted to. Most of my friends were in the graduating class right before mine, and I was starting to prepare for the idea that my senior year, I wasn't particularly close with my own class. So I was starting to prepare for that. They were all going to leave me. And I spoke to my guidance counselor, who said that technically I had the credit to graduate from high school early, which also my parents kind of put their foot down on. They said, you can't go to college right after you turn 16. There's more to college than just the academics of college.
Parents were really smart. Yeah. I
They're
would have done
thoughtful
the same
people.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not understand at the time. So I wouldn't say it was spiteful, but there was something in it, in the application to the program, that was based in my wanting to fill that time with something other than, if I do have a year.
Wow. That is super cool. Were your parents like, go for it on this program, not knowing where you were going to go? Or again, she's not going to get in, so we'll just let her have her fun.
They had input, when my original top choices included some countries where the language that I would be learning would be Farsi, and my mother was like very unsure whether she wanted to send me anywhere where there might be political unrest.
That's fair.
Yeah, so I was pretty young at the time, and sort of didn't want to be treated my age, which it's that was a little out of line sometimes, but yeah, they had input, and I came prepared with information when I talked to them about it. They came with me to my interviews, and it's a fairly inexpensive program for accepted students. Essentially, if I recall correctly, like, other than incidentals, you only are responsible for an open-ended round-trip ticket, and everything else is sponsored through the Rotary, which is awesome.
That's an amazing experience that you got there, that you were able to do.
Yeah, I felt very lucky, and that was by chance. I was a late applicant because I had decided that I wanted to do this a little bit late in the game.
So you do your year, you come back. It's got to be tough coming back home after that, with all the
Yeah.
freedom that you had, because You live in my house, you follow my rules. There's just no way around that.
Not only that, but also transportation. Public transportation is so good in Japan. And I had moved there when I was 15 and suddenly was able to go and do almost anything by myself. I had another student in the program invite me to come up for Golden Week to where their host family was staying. And when the parents talked and agreed on it, they were like, okay, bye. And I went and traveled to Nagano, which is a few hours away by train by myself. I wasn't even 16 yet. And then I came back to a place where driving is the culture.
And 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds are not allowed to do anything.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a very different
completely
experience.
different. Yeah. It's like, why did I come home?
It's funny though that you say that, because most people ask me if it was hard to leave. And I was very excited to go. I didn't feel homesick right away until maybe a little bit of the novelty wore off. I think that I had almost as hard a time coming back as I did leaving.
I would have had a harder time coming back. I wouldn't even have thought about the leaving part. It's you got to go back to an old life that you've moved beyond it already.
I was ready to be done. Yeah, to do something
and I told
else.
that to my kids when I kicked them out of the house to go to college. I said, you're going away, and don't think that this is your room, because once you leave, you'll never want to be back in it, except for maybe a night or two. And they don't know what I'm talking about. And
Not
obviously
yet.
after their first semester in college and they had to come back, it was like, you get it. So you finish high school now with that year in Japan.
So yeah, I did that. It was technically my junior year. They allowed it to fulfill my language credit. And then I finished, I spent my last 9 months finishing in Nogales, and then I went to the University of Arizona.
Now, when did you apply to Arizona? At that point, you're in Japan
When
applying?
I got back.
The moment you got back.
They have, state schools have pretty good acceptance for high achieving students inside of the state.
Is that the school you wanted to go to, or that was the school that made the most sense at the time?
It was the school I think I could afford to go to. I think logistically it made the most sense to go to a school where my education would be essentially paid for versus a school where I'd be incurring debt.
Did you know at the time what you wanted to major in, or it didn't matter? You were going to do your liberal arts and figure it out?
I started college as a biochem major, and
whoa. We haven't talked at all about bio or chem at this point. So where does biochemistry come into it?
Well, I mentioned virology. Like there was, I was always really fascinated by sort of the pop sciences, and I did well in my chemistry classes, especially in school. I knew that I think that I knew that career-wise, I did not want to do something that sort of relied on my ability to write or convince or interact or communicate, because I didn't feel like that was a strong skill of mine at the time. So I wanted to learn, applicable things. With the application was less important than learning things that I didn't previously have access to. Sort of similar to why I chose to go to Japan. So I took a bunch of general biology, general chemistry, then organic chemistry, and I enjoyed the chemistry classes more than the biology classes, which at the time had a lot of memorization as part of the curriculum. Just, memorize all of these amino acids, memorize these pathways. And there is a lot of biology that is maybe theorized but hand wavy, whereas chemistry, I could witness physical reactions. There was something extremely logical that I was able to observe there. But my math classes were my favorite. And that was a surprise to me, because in high school, I didn't dislike math. I didn't attach to it as my primary interest. And then in college, I pretty quickly switched to being a mathematics major.
That's interesting, because math is hard. Math was hard for me.
It's hard for everybody.
I got calculus 2 and barely scraped by, I think, with a C in college, and was happy with the idea that my grade wouldn't be on my diploma. So
I think
Kevin's laughing because he's in university right now, but you just took to it. Like, when light bulbs turn on, it's amazing.
What I'll say is that mathematics is pretty difficult for everybody. Even mathematicians, would say that. But there is something constructed about it that makes it it makes it possible to follow, because it is all consistent. It's logically consistent. And actually, so I think it was in calculus 2, which was, I think the first math class that I took at university, I could be wrong, where I became interested in mathematics because all of a sudden there were patterns being introduced that I hadn't seen before. Just patterns when it comes to things like the log scale, or the concept of, what happens as something becomes infinitesimally small or approaches infinity. Trying to model those things in a logical sense, given like a set of rules, is really fun. It was my puzzles again. So I think that's why I chose it. I didn't choose it with any particular career in mind. I just wanted to take more math classes.
And you ended up with that. You ended up graduating with that major in math. I mean, you had to do a lot of math for that. So I just got to throw this at you, because one of my favorite movies, because of kind of the math that they show that I can't do, is Goodwill Hunting.
Oh yeah.
That moment when he sees it on the whiteboard and he just starts cranking it out and everybody's freaking out. You've seen that movie? Does that movie, like, what does that movie bring up in terms of, I don't know, anything? What pops in your head when I say Goodwill Hunting, related to even the bio stuff he was doing for his girlfriend, right? Like he said, it just comes easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some people it really does. Sometimes people will see, so I think that scene is based on a real type of challenge, if I recall. It's been a really long time since I've seen that movie, but there are these problems that are currently unsolved, that there is a large prize for solving. There are some anecdotal stories, I wish I could remember the mathematicians, but of someone leaving an unsolved problem on a whiteboard and someone coming along and proposing a solution without knowing that the problem is unsolved. So there's some truth to that story.
I wonder that when you watch the movie and the problem is on the board, do you just stop? Did you stop and just say, okay, I'm taking a picture of that. I want to play with that problem. Like if I was a mathematician at your level, I think it would cause me to stop for a second.
To try and understand as much of it as you can. Mathematics is so broad, that everyone has sort of a specialization in a discipline once you get to like a graduate level of mathematics, let alone, research. That, we used to, as a group, some of my math friends and I used to attend like symposia and things like that. And even just getting like any kind of inkling, like some idea of what the research this person was doing was, unless they are working somehow in the same area as you, even just understanding all of the bases for their logical steps is difficult, or even just understanding what the conclusion means. There are many disciplines inside of mathematics, but I did really enjoy it, and I found it hard to specialize there as well. It was hard. I would say that like mathematics is where I, and probably a lot of other people, learned a little bit to temper our egos, because
it's humbling.
It's extremely humbling for everyone. I'd be in a class full of math majors. Everyone had chosen to study it. Everyone was at least in their junior year of college. And, the high score on a 100-point test would be a 30. It's not uncommon that, you were just stumped. There's an old math joke that I think also can apply to what we do, right, as software developers, which is that being a mathematician is a little bit like being a manic depressive, because you're just always cycling between like the darkest despair and like the giddy installation. You either have it and you're a genius, or you don't and you're just worthless. Like one or the other is
Okay. Now I have a question, because I forgot to ask you what you were doing today to set the story up. And I'm not gonna ask you that right now. We're in this story. We're gonna get there as a surprise. But in several podcasts, I've talked recently about my wife starting a boot camp and how I've had to talk to her about being able to stop working on a problem at times, because this stuff is like crack cocaine. You get into it and you don't want to stop. But is the math like that too? You have a problem and you just don't want to stop working on it. It just consumes you.
yes. And then you realize that you're going in a circle. It is almost exactly the same for me, at least. You realize that you're going in a circle, and you have to take a step back, take a step away, and reorient yourself and recall where you started cycling before, and maybe zoom out or take a step from there, or think about what else okay, what other tools do I have under my belt here? What if I don't?
We kind of need Git for mathematics, right?
Yes.
We need Git for mathematics, so you can go back to an old commit.
I mean, I still sometimes will set up when I'm doing some kind of like, I don't know, like a design spike or something. I'll do it like we used to do a proof, where you first start at the end, right? You say, like, I want to show this, right? I want to have this as a product. Here is what I have to start with, right? And you start building bridges in both directions. Like you kind of go, okay, so for this outcome, I need these infrastructure pieces. I need these things. Okay, so that means that in here somewhere, I'm probably going to need, I don't know, like an elastic load balancer or something. And then you start putting things together. And you're like, okay, so what, where I'm starting, what do I already have in place that might help me solve this problem?
It's a data transformation where you got input, output, and you got to figure out how to get there. But it's math.
Yeah, and in math, there are a bunch of strategies. Sometimes you do by elimination. You think of, what if I didn't do it this way? Like, or what if this wasn't true? Like, what if I didn't need this? And then you keep working until you essentially show that that's impossible. and so if you reach the place where it's impossible, then you're like, okay, so I do need that.
Okay.
It does work.
No, that's amazing. But once you graduate with your undergraduate degree in mathematics, what are you thinking? Like, you don't want to go into a classroom. You don't want to be a teacher. What do you want to do?
A lot of my friends picked very practical disciplines. Actually, a lot of people in my program went to grad school, and then a lot of people pick up some kind of engineering adjacent discipline, even like things like actuarial sciences, and anything involving like risk modeling, and anything R&D. You see a lot of math people in R&D departments. I wasn't really sure. I never had a really strong focus on a particular area of mathematics, but one way that, I guess it's kind of similar to how I am with software developers, was very obviously differentiated at some point by my willingness to engage with strangers and even lay people on technical problems. I took a job. I moved to Seattle with my high school boyfriend who had taken a job at Microsoft, my college boyfriend who had taken a job at Microsoft. And I took a job at a company called Digipen, which is
I'm going to stop you for a second. Your college boyfriend went to Microsoft. Was he a computer science?
Yes, he was double. He was math and computer science.
So you had been exposed already to programming and stuff.
Yes. Oh, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah. Well, I did take a programming class in college on the recommendation of my advisor. And I was extremely intimidated, much more so than by any of my math classes, not by the content, but by the students. So I felt like for an intro to programming class, I had never attempted to write and run a program myself before. I had done a lot of tinkering, even in high school, where I would take I don't know, like I would take be exploring the file system of a game, for example, and find things to alter so that I could see different things happen in the real world. Or I was a kid who bricked a computer a few times, deleting registry keys and trying to do fun stuff. but I had never, I didn't know very much about like how to write a program and how to run that program. And so when I started in a programming class, and pretty much on day one, realized that almost everyone around me had some programming experience. I felt intimidated. People came in with opinions about the language, and uh, you know, uh, critiques about like why we would have to do this when this library exists, and I didn't even really know what any of that was yet. We started with I think my year was the year they switched from Java to C Sharp. So they did object oriented programming at my university for new students. And I never really understood what the purpose of an abstraction was. Abstractions and patterns and like factories and things that we were asked to create were for things like, a generic animal,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and I didn't understand what would be the purpose of having this generic animal. And every time I tried to solve a problem in a way that was fun for me, I found out that the way that the solution was supposed to be presented was a bit more brute. I would try to find a creative way to solve a maze, and then realize at the end that we were really just supposed to follow the wall. And I didn't have any fun in that class. I think I did worse in it than any of my others because I just didn't enjoy going to it.
Right. And that left a bad taste in your mouth moving forward.
If I had been a little bit older, I might have realized that everyone's opinions on whether a language is better with or without pointers, sort of indicates a lack of experience on their part. Everything is just a tool. You might use this tool for that job and that tool for a job with different needs.
Well, it's a good thing your boyfriend at the time was mathematician, because he would have said computer science and you would have said, sorry, not interested.
We did fight a lot about not really fight, but we did have a lot of disagreements about like the importance of theoretical mathematics. He was very, very strongly in favor of the idea that the discrete world is the only world that's real, and that the square root of 2 is not calculable and therefore doesn't actually exist in the real world. So, so we had a lot of arguments about that. And then I'd draw a square, draw a line across the diagonal, and be like, then what's the length of that? And then he'd be like, measure it with a ruler. It's not infinite. It's not going to be.
Those are good
immeasurable.
discussions. They're good discussions to have when you've been drinking whiskey, and then you let your mind kind of loosen up a little bit there.
Yes.
Okay, so you graduate. You both graduate, and you decide.
He graduated before me.
He graduates before you. He goes to Seattle, gets a job at Microsoft, which is pretty cool. It's a big deal. And then you graduate and decide, okay, I'm going to go to Seattle. I'd like to see Seattle. I mean, right?
I had visited, yeah.
Yeah, you like Seattle. That sounds cool. And you get a job at Digipen doing what?
Doing mathematics curriculum development for their program. So Digipen is a school. It's a video game programming university. They have a BS in computer science with a sort of a subtitle of a real-time interactive simulation. It's games focused. They have a lot of strong connections to the games industry. And so they have a lot of incoming students who are non-traditional students and maybe need a refresher on the sort of mathematics that they need to take, like linear algebra their first year, for example. because linear algebra and matrices and like manipulating curves and surfaces those are all really important for graphics programming. And part of the computer science program there, I believe, is that you build a graphics engine.
So they didn't have any of this math kind of laid out?
They had a lot of it, but they wanted to provide more resources for students at different levels, and essentially wanted to generate their own resources rather than a lot of colleges use resources that are created by another school. So there was an initiative where they wanted to create resources focused around, essentially streamlined to what they wanted their students to be learning. Yeah.
But at that level, I mean, I would imagine that there isn't a lot of flexibility in examples. You need these sets of examples to teach it. Like that's not going to change. Maybe you change letters, but I don't know.
More just like what to emphasize, if that makes sense, was the goal, and at what level to introduce different ideas and things like that. But you're right that year to year, I mean, I wasn't there for much more than a year, but everything seemed to stay pretty static. I couldn't really see a lot of growth for myself in that space. And, without a graduate degree, I think a teaching position would also have been really rote for me, in terms of the level. Plus, I wasn't a programmer. So if kids came to me with graphics questions and things like that, I was a little bit lost in that space. So my area of expertise was particularly limited, and I decided to try and figure out what I didn't want to commute to the east side anymore to work. I was living inside of the city, which is still where I live. Um, and I decided to try and find some sort of data analysis or data science work in maybe health or biology. I had worked at a biology lab in college as a part-time job, and thought that I actually had done some research in some applied mathematics in that area, just sort of modeling evolution and the genome through the years. So I started putting out applications to.
This is like 2008, right?
This would be probably like 2010, 2009, 10.
2010. Okay.
So we're going back at least 10 years still. I started looking for jobs in those spaces, but I was finding it really difficult to find a job in the health or sciences fields, which I found out is because Seattle's a much bigger market than the one that I came from for those areas. And so I was when I was lucky enough to have good feedback from someone who interviewed me, they would tell me that essentially that I was qualified and that everyone had liked me, but they also had PhD applicants for the same position. So I was really struggling to find something that would serve me, and I eventually.
Wait. Did you ever have the thought of, shit, I got to go back to school?
Yeah, I did, but I knew I didn't want to do graduate school in mathematics, and I knew that I didn't feel prepared to jump into any other type of school. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do some kind of training. Interestingly, I just sort of ended up getting a lot of on the job training as I went along. I took a temporary position with very little knowledge of what the job would look like, doing a data QA for a legal administration company. And they hired me full time. I worked there, eventually becoming the most senior person on their data team, because I picked up SQL really fast, which I guess you would expect from my background, but they did not expect of me. So I worked closely with the DBAs, and I met their amazing database designer, who taught me a lot of great SQL principles, always helped me do things in an optimal way.
Did you enjoy taking your data analytics and math in your head and kind of projecting that into SQL and in databases to get those answers? right? I mean, it's a form of doing mathematical.
Yes. It's very functional. Yeah, very concrete and discrete. Yeah, I really did enjoy what I enjoyed most about that. I think I had always sort of elevated the concepts of mathematics like above. Um, I never really thought that I had much of a head for things like business, but I enjoyed that I felt helpful, especially. There would be an attorney who would come to me and be like, I need this particular type of data, or um, we've been ordered by the court to match these names with this crazy data import that we need to do. Um, and being able to explain to them, as simply as possible what the plan would be, and then execute on it so that they could, relay with confidence what existed and didn't exist inside of that data, um, it made me feel very helpful. That's a huge blocker for people who don't feel comfortable working inside of a database. Yeah,
So how long were you at this company?
about 2 years.
Okay. And then what happened 2 years later? Because it sounds like you're enjoying this work. You've learned a bunch of tech. You're helping out the company tremendously and legal stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens 2 years later?
I got bored. I spoke to my manager about possibly taking on a different role. And he said, well, I have management roles, but I don't know that you'd be interested in being a people manager. And I said, no, I don't really think I want to be a people manager. um, and he said, well, why don't you look around? And we had at the time like an internal claims management software. It was a pretty simple piece of machinery. It's what our reports were generated from when they were not being generated automatically. By our reports, I mean the reports that my team would produce. I knew that we had a development team, and they even had a few manual testers on that software. So I went to the director of IT's office, and I asked him if there was anything I could do to prepare myself to be a good candidate for a position on his team, possibly as a tester. Knowing that like I had the capacity to, I was always filing bugs with them. I was always breaking something, or a bug would come through, and then software would kick it to data, and I would find where it happened in between. I remember the way that I met that director was actually really funny. Someone had a screenshot of a submission that they'd made through the website that should have hit the database and generated a row, but no one could find this row. But the guy had his screenshot as proof. So I went into the actual code base for submission and followed it through until I could see that as like a precursor to that row being created, the form data was dumped as XML into a field in SQL. And when I searched the contents of those fields in that seconds range, I was able to find it, and it was truncated. So something happened to that stream, but because it was corrupted, that data never made it into the database. So I sent that explanation out to the team. It wasn't assigned to me. I was just really curious about how that could have possibly happened. And that's how I met the director, because he came by my desk and said, how did you find this? So anyway, I had gone to him and said, is there a way I can prepare to apply to a role on your team? I think I'm done learning new things on mine for now. And he said that they were about to open a position for a junior software developer, and that he would like me to apply with the team. They knew me. They'd known me for a few years, and he said he thought I'd be a good candidate. And I stopped him and said, no, I am not a programmer. I don't know how to do that. And he said, he's like, we've seen how you solve problems and think we can show you the ropes. It's not too, it won't be too intense. I promise. He's like, no junior software engineer comes in knowing what they're doing anyways. And I did apply. I was selected by the team, and a few months later, I started in my first role with almost, no background. We were working on an ASP.NET type stack. And
Are you still with your boyfriend at Microsoft at the time?
no, I don't even think that lasted a year after we came to Seattle.
I was just going to say you could have gone home and said, okay, I'm a software developer now.
I think he actually did at times work on ASP.NET related things too. But yeah, he worked in dev, so that's developer tools.
So now you get this job as a software developer in the same company, right? How long did you do that? How long were you doing that job?
I worked there for about a year and a half, but it was a very eventful year and a half. It was fun to see different types of teaching and mentorship that I received from different people on the team, and what works better for me. It was exciting to be able to solve problems and even to see the problems that experienced developers had. And then within 6 months, we ended up building a new claims processing application. So I got to work on a greenfield project, and that one was Angular with a MongoDB backend, MongoDB database, and a Node.js server behind it backend. So I learned some new technologies too. Got to learn a little bit about like infrastructure management and packaging and all these things I had never touched the actual business of creating software and running a service. So that was really fun.
And then what happens? What did you say? You were there for almost 2 years.
Yeah. So I think now we're probably around 2015 in time. Oh gosh, 2015 or 2016. Our software project was finished, and the company started to talk about doing a handoff to contractors to maintain the software. So we kind of all started job hunting in anticipation. So I got to interview for a software job for the very first time. Like in a sense where I wasn't saying, here's what I don't know, but here's what I can bring to the table. And instead I was having to talk about what I could bring based on my short experience and then my broader, longer experience.
I'm curious that you were now looking for another job. You wanted to continue to be a software developer at that point?
Yeah, I did. I had really enjoyed my job. Before I started it, I had walked into my director's office. His name is Chris Barnett, really wonderful man. He's the one who suggested it in the first place. And I said, Chris, what if I'm not good at this? Like, what if I hate it? What if I struggle a lot with it? I'm feeling concern about that. And he said in a very droll way, like, well, if you don't like it, I guess you go back to your old job. Very, very practical man. So I had also had a moment of anxiety, maybe about 8 months into the job, when we were just about to be building this new product, this new piece of software, where I thought, what if none of the things I've been doing here, which are all within my grasp, are transferable skills? Like, what if none of them are actually useful for a future career doing this? What if I have to start over if I find another software job? So actually I reached out to Ian, who I'd known for years. We originally were just friends over Nerditry and, I don't know, quoting Futurama type things. And I knew he was a software engineer, and I reached out to him and essentially said, like, how do I make sure I'm doing useful things here, and things that will be in demand, like career wise. How do I know that what I'm doing is useful? And he was really kind. He made a connection actually between me and a former director of his named Heather, and he also suggested that I go muck around in the Go playground, uh, and do the tour of Go, and see if I enjoyed that. And actually, one of the main things that I use when I teach and mentor, I learned from Heather, and I don't even know if this is a principle of hers or not, but when I poured out my heart to her about my concerns and, my fears and what should I be studying and learning and where should my emphasis be, she said, "You've been doing this for 8 months. You're doing fine." I feel like people don't tell other people enough that they're doing okay. So I try to, I've been lucky to have champions in my career, like the director who hired me, or Heather, or people who will tell me, that I'm doing okay, that I'm doing a good job. And so as like a corollary, I try to do that for other people as well.
Yeah, it's nice, and everybody needs both positive and constructive feedback at times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I try
absolutely.
to give to my teams as well. Not every day, or it doesn't mean anything, but when somebody does something that I'll tell you this: when somebody on my team does something that allows me to go, like I don't have to deal with that anymore. We got through that. I am for sure showing my appreciation for that. Right?
Yeah, let people know how they're valuable or what they're good at. There are a lot of opportunities, I think, in the workplace to provide feedback, direct feedback, but I like to provide people with actionable feedback when I can. And instead of saying, um, this person is abrasive or something like that, to instead say, it, like, this person might want to take opportunities to show other people their goodwill, and that they're invested in the success of the team, because they might be misinterpreted, given that they try to. I'd like to try to give people something that they can take forward and practice, because it's all practice for all of us.
Oh no, for sure. Like when I was young, I was a bull in a china shop. I had a lot of people around me that would just put me on the side and say, "Bill, you can't do that. Bill, this is how you have to do," right? So I do that now. I've got young kids that are developers who sometimes get a little too aggressive or too direct, and I have to pull them back and say, "Look, you can't say that. The tone is wrong. We got to be, I know you didn't mean it. I know it
Yes.
just came across that way, but we have to work on this, right? Like, I'm not going to fire you. Relax. That's not what this is about. We're
Right.
just
This is about improving
learn.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to
I'm
learn
on your
because
side. Yeah.
I had enough people that could have fired me,
That's right.
and didn't. They allowed me to learn. So we got to pass that on.
In an opposite way, or an opposing, but I think dovetailing way. Like, you sometimes have people who are kind of a bull in a china shop, or very, very aggressive with their thoughts. And then you also have people, who are very timid, like they want to be invited to speak or to do something more. And uh, so I remember in his keynote, I think it'd go for Con 2019, Johnny Borsiquot said something about not waiting for permission. I think a lot of times, when people are starting to get things going in their career, they look around for someone to tell them the next step, or for the right time and place to take the next step. Um, and uh, in my experience, people are willing to help you. There are always people willing to help you. Not everyone is willing to help you, but there are always people who are willing to help you. But you have to be taking this step, and you cannot ask. Like, people are not going to tell you no unless they have a and if they have unless they have a solid reason. You don't have to listen to a no.
I've been mentoring somebody who's in a like a PhD program at Duke University. She decided that she didn't want to finish the PhD. She loves programming so much. She wants to jump into programming, which I think is awesome. And we were fortunate enough to get her an interview. And I was CC'd on one of the emails, and she had asked permission to send. She started a conversation and then asked permission if she could send her resume. And I immediately went behind the scenes and I said, next time, don't ask. You're already talking to them. Just send it.
Send it.
Like,
Yeah.
stop
Here's my
it.
resume.
That's it. Hey, and by the way, if you still want to talk to me, that's great. And here's my resume. Like, just don't ask for permission for these types of things. Just
almost like the just say hello thing that people talk about a lot. Yeah.
yeah.
Which
but that's
I,
got to be learned.
Yeah, I understand why the timidity. I mean, I think I can even really strongly empathize with it. No one wants to feel like they've overstepped, but like I think some of that just comes with self-confidence, and at least for me, some of that has been kind of a fake it as you make it situation, fake it till you make it situation as an adult.
We're all faking it until we make it. But I think sometimes what you can do is put yourself on the other side of that table and say, would you have preferred that they sent it or asked, and then behave in that sort of manner, right? We're all really, really busy and we don't have time. And so it's better and we're already a society of like, just tell what is it? Just,
yeah. I mean, there's like a psychological safety thing in there that, people have to grow a feeling of safety. I don't know, it takes time.
It takes time, but hopefully the people around you are honest enough to guide you when you make that mistake. Or even a couple things she did in some email conversations she had, I was like, that's amazing. That was perfect. It's exactly the way you want to do it. Right. So it's got to go both ways. Okay. Look, we've got like 15 minutes left, and
it's not enough time.
I know it's never enough. This podcast, it's never enough time, but that's what we got. So I want to know what happens. Okay. This is what we're going to do, because I forgot to ask this question, and I usually like to ask it in the beginning. So I'm going to ask it, and then we're going to kind of fill in. It's going to be like a mathematical proof. Okay. So
the bridge.
We're going to build the bridge here in 15 minutes. So tell everybody kind of what you're doing right now. What is Vanessa doing right now today?
Work-wise.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Work-wise,
so,
not
work-wise. Not in life. Sitting at my desk right now.
Well, I see a keyboard behind me, so I mean, maybe playing some music, but
it's, off hours stuff. But yeah, no, I work for Warner Brothers Discovery. I've worked there for coming up on 3 years. I work
like Discovery Channel, Discovery.
Yeah, Warner Brothers and Discovery had a merger this last year. So it was a content-related merger. So,
oh my goodness! This week, my wife and I were watching TV, and some station was advertising another station, and my wife said, "Aren't they competitors? What's going on?" And she looked it up, and it was because of the Warner Brothers merger brought together.
I'm affected by that.
It brought together a whole bunch of stations that we had no idea were affiliated, and we just started seeing them like showcase each other. Okay.
Yeah, well, already Warner Brothers is a very large. We were Warner Media before. Is a very large company. So, some of the things that we were supporting previously were like CNN, HBO, Bleacher Report. Lots of live sports. Mm-hmm.
That's what it was, by the way. It was HBO and CNN advertising with each other.
Yeah, they belong to the same banner, and they all actually have for a really long time. So the ones that are just coming on board are the Discovery Channel's properties, which are like Food Network.
So this is what freaks me out. When I think of Warner Brothers, what the first thing that pops into my head? Bugs Bunny.
Animaniacs. Yeah, exactly.
Bugs Bunny, Warner Brothers. It's Bugs Bunny. And so I can't comprehend Warner Brothers being able to buy CNN and HBO or however that'll get.
It's been a while. So we're all actually, I think my paycheck still says Turner.
It's just mind blowing to me that they had that kind of cash, because I think of Bugs Bunny. And I went, how is that even possible?
I might be wrong, but yeah, I think that Discovery actually was the lead on this, because Discovery does make a lot of money with their properties. HBO's properties tend to be more like, I'm trying to think of a better word, but a word I hear used a lot is like elite properties, like HBO and CNN and I don't know, DC Comics and things like that.
You're not grouped into all the other kind of stations that fill in airtime on cable. Like I think of, and I loved History and I love Discovery, and those two in
Shark Week.
particular, right? I wasn't a fan of like TLC or something, but they're all they're all networks that kind of just filled in programming, so you would have 100 stations to choose from. That's the way I always imagined it. But everybody
A lot of
gravitates.
people play them in the background.
Yeah.
Nobody plays HBO all day, but people will play HGTV all day. Yes.
Yeah. Especially if they're like into the Kardashian show. Then that one's on. Like that was all day in my house when my girls were younger, right? So. Okay, so cool. Okay, so you work on the Discovery side. What are you doing?
I don't. I work on the Warner side, but yeah,
Warner side. Okay.
I do. Although we're all adopting each other's tech right now, so I work in the live video space, and I specifically work on our live video transcoder. So,
what does that mean? You're writing code. You're writing the code for the transcoder.
Yes. I moved onto that team in I think December, off of a team that handled things like entitlement, which was more of a typical API.
What programming language are they using
Go.
to build?
Go, and a lot of the lower level stuff is C++.
Wow. So what do you do? Wow. So you went
so
from
the video pipeline is big. Yeah.
But think about this for a second, because we were only in 2015 or 16, and you had just finished really writing Node with some Mongo, and you were really building a browser-based sort of app. And now you're like doing performance sort of Go performance engineering on a transcoder. That's a completely different level of engineering.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to be on this team because I have three. It's a small team, like most teams, kind of pizza sized. There are 5 developers on my team, and 3 are principal engineers. So I can go to them for just about anything video related that I might want to know. But yeah, so the part of the pipeline from raw video to video on your app or your web browser or whatever that I work in is the part where we ingest a raw video, and then we process it so that we can send out like MPG segments to be published and packaged and DRM'd and whatever needs to happen for them to be delivered.
You must have a hard time watching anything now on your mobile devices because your brain starts going, I know how that got delivered now, and I know everything that happened behind the scenes.
Well, especially working on live video, you have to be very, you mentioned performance, right? You have to be very efficient because nobody wants a delay in their live video stream. And things do take time. So
are you like cutting that into those 10-second blocks?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like smaller even. Yeah. Like little segments of, segments of like encoded video and audio that are packaged together. And then we send them as messages like over gRPC, little clusters. Mm-hmm.
Are you also doing any work where you're slicing the live video with whatever that commercial is or ad or?
Yeah, we do. Yes, it's called slating. When you lose a source stream or you want to stop a source stream, you'll throw a slate down, which can be a black screen or it could be pre-configured. They say like, thanks for watching, or if you're watching a live video and the commercial doesn't come up and instead it's like just some sort of like animated loop. Yeah, that's a slate, and that comes up when things aren't timed correctly. We also, every video comes with like a manifest that essentially says like where commercial breaks should be slotted and things like that as well.
But when you're delivering that video content, it's going to another team that eventually is streaming it to a device, right? You're not on the device side.
Yeah, there. Well, the only thing that we do that is device related, right, is oh gosh, everything has to be packaged for delivery to whoever is going to be streaming it. So like we now support up to 4K live streaming, uh, but you want to package things at varying levels of quality, varying bit rates, um, so that you can deliver to you know the guy who's on the bus watching on his cell network as well.
And so the work that you're doing for Warner's Brothers is going to eventually cut across all their, say, platforms, all their.
Yeah, yeah. We're currently like merging tech streams, I guess. Like any any parts of the architecture that don't match, we're adopting different sides. But I believe our transcoding team uh, is the one that's going to be our model is going to be adopted by other teams at the company. It's everything is a service, so everything is kind of a box where people need to configure their channels. They need to set up what they want things to be like, put things into a scheduler, and then everything on our side should be automatic. It should be able to, if it can reach that source input, um, take the configuration and the schedule, and then at the right time spin up channels for each type of configuration that we need. So like there's a demuxer, and then we have to do things with subtitles, and we have to do things with syncing. There's a whole bunch of pieces to my team. Yeah, and then there's a channel control kind of API.
I had a moment. I don't remember. Was this? Or it's only Tuesday, so maybe it wasn't this week. Maybe it was over the weekend. I had this weird moment where I realized that like there is music and or video being streamed over the internet 24 hours a day, and I don't know how it's all capable of being on the internet at the same time. Just in
Why do
my
we have
house
so much
alone.
internet?
I like I got 2 TVs, 3 phones, and a tablet running at the same time, all streaming content, which is kind of it's not like, you know, the coax model was you had TV streaming into your house all day, whether you turned the channel or not. So
Right.
the, when I think about like Comcast, the beauty of the internet was going to be they didn't have to stream all
Right.
those
Only when
bits
requested. Yeah.
only when requested. But the problem is that these bits are now requested all day regardless.
Yes.
You didn't really cut down on the bandwidth, right? If
No.
anything, you've
Yeah.
made it larger.
Yeah, one of the last things I worked on entitlements was different companies also have different types of subscription models that they want enabled. Uh, it was sort of like a device eviction scenario where, say someone is authorized to have 5 streams from a particular company at a time, and then they try to start on a 6th device. Do we reject a device or do we evict one of these? And if so, which one? As it's kind of a
I like the eviction
fun
model
business problem.
only
Yeah, I
because
mean,
they
yeah,
like the stream, but then it's always like, what's going on? But yeah, no.
yeah. And which device do you evict the one that was last started? Do you evict the one that was last requested? You know, if you can try to identify which one is not currently active, but it's kind of tricky. If you're not careful, you could set off a loop as well of your two playing devices at once.
I don't know if it was a music app or not, but I gave my credentials to my son. Every time he was using the app, I couldn't use it, and it would drive me crazy. I'm like, "Damn it, get off that thing. I need it now," kind of thing. And I would have
Family
preferred
plan.
he got kicked off, but you know what would have happened? He would have just kicked me off, and then
Right, you would have started again, that loop situation.
you don't
Yeah.
know what's happening. You just think the app broke, and you just start it again.
There are a lot of considerations with video. I mean, even all the way down to we also like we publish a lot of streams on contract as well. So we do uh, we call them internally like we have like a Yankee Sports Network and then the Madison Square Gardens Network. Both come through us, and so that it's like a very specific contract, but it's a lot of viewership. lot of people subscribe
It's New York
to
sports? No, for sure. And you're playing the live games when they're on.
You have to
And
be a
then,
subscriber to their
oh,
channels to see
yeah.
them. And then because there's blackout areas as well, right?
Yeah.
For those games. So we
I
set
hate
up.
blackout.
I know, but yeah, the blackout has to be enforced by somebody, and that's.
And then you have to detect proxy servers. I hate when they detect my proxy server and they finally add it to a list. It drives me crazy. I'm like, I just lost my ninja stealth. Yeah, there's a lot.
Almost everything that we do also happens kind of behind reverse proxies for like reasons of DDoSing, and yeah, it's very interesting. I've learned a lot here.
Amazing education on networking. Streaming's not going anywhere.
It's
Anybody
pretty
that's
cool.
got
Yeah.
experience and you're interested in it, you're gonna be working for a long time. Now, last couple of questions here. I'm not going to try to build the bridge because you're in such a cool space right now. That's amazing, the bridge that you did jump from saying, you know what, I don't think I want to be a junior programmer to now doing this hardcore ghost tech, man. Oh my God.
Lots of, a lot of times it's just like trying to make and take advantage of openings, like you can't always find the exact opening you want, but you can kind of speak it to people, like what it is that you want. And sometimes that will show you where the openings are. So I've been interested in this team since I started at the company. They had an availability finally. So
Have you been able to leverage any of your math background on this team?
Oh, well, I don't know yet, but I feel like I leverage mathematics thought processes like almost in everything that I do. In real life, it can be to a fault, but in work scenarios, like being able to think through and like find where there's a logical leap that is unexplained has been just useful my entire programming career thus far.
Actually, I'm also curious. I don't care what time it is. I have to ask you that question.
You can ask me whatever.
How did you get your Go skills up to the level of working on this team as quickly as you did? This isn't a junior dev position you're in. It could be intermediate, but you still had to know enough Go to not slow down the team. So how did you do that?
I worked with strong people kind of from the start. It was not really a plan. It just sort of happened that way, where my first job, this actually does just kind of build the bridge a little bit. My first job outside of the legal administration company was for a company that did a global positioning software that was beginning like a B2B2C model, whereas they were kind of powering as a service, like if you did pick up from Target or something like that. The situation where once you entered a geofence, it would ping them to bring stuff outside, their location and your location would be broadcast to each other and for a short period of time until the exchange is made, kind of software. So I knew that I had liked working with Go, and I applied to this company because they were rebuilding their services in Go. Then when I started working there, I was asked almost immediately, do you know anybody else who's strong in Go? Now, I didn't feel like I was particularly strong in Go, but Go's always made a lot of sense to me. I really like the thoroughness of the way we handle errors. I really like that I can follow it through very well. I really love the compiler messages we get out of Go almost all of the time. And I reached out to Ian, who connected me to someone he used to work with. If you know Zach, whose partner is currently also doing a boot camp, just like yours. And he joined my team and was a really great mentor for me. Like we'd be writing and he'd look over my shoulder and I'd be like, how do I do this if there may be multiple inputs here? He's like, oh, you don't know about variadic arguments? Here, let's pair, yeah. And working with people, he learned that I liked feedback a lot. So he would essentially like knit my PRs a lot even on just things that were maybe like strong preferences that he had. But I would always ask him why. And some of them I adopted myself, and just things like handling errors right away, like up front. Any sort of fail out situation, fail out fast. I didn't know enough to do that yet. That wasn't necessarily, yeah. So I learned quite a bit there. And he and I worked together then in a startup situation after we left Glimpse. And then our startup kind of lost its revenue stream at the beginning of 2020 when the world was falling apart business-wise and otherwise. And a friend of mine from the Go community in Seattle, she was one of the organizers here, Meg Brenner. She invited me to apply at her Warner Media streaming company.
Yay, Zach.
I know. Good job, Zach.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I love when I'm doing a code review and I'm getting to the nitpicky, and I'll say that to the person. I'm nitpicking now because there's nothing else to talk about.
No, I love that. Yes.
Right? Like this is where we're at. So
I have that on my team now too, which is something that I really enjoy. And they were kind enough to let me know up front, like, hey, by the way, we're going to go through your PRs really carefully. And I was like, yes, please. It's always kind of a pleasure to have somebody be like, this works this way, but we may have something else that you can model this after already. Like you may not need to do all of this, Yeah,
that's good.
It's great. They're a good team.
And
a good team matters more than anything, right?
Yes, because you live like at least a third of your life with them every day. So if you're miserable with that family, you're going to be miserable with everybody else and the other 2/3 of your day. So no, that's critically important.
They become your community. Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm sad. That means that I now have to get on a plane to Seattle so we can continue our conversation over a glass of whiskey. Sounds good. I love your story. I love how you got to where you are today, that you took those opportunities and you made the most of them. Still never lost your love for math, right? Do you get to do anything on the math side at all, whether it's tutoring or?
Usually when I do, I would say that like my love for mathematics is limited by my capacity. It takes a lot to be really involved in mathematics. As far as favorite concepts and favorite proofs and things like that, I do like to share them with people just because math is a study of patterns, right? And pattern recognition. But in that way, a lot of things are mathematics to me.
No, it's good. When the 15-year-old is a sophomore, is struggling with her math, I look at it and my brain goes, I don't even remember doing this. And then my wife will jump in and say, come here, I'll help you. And she'll like help her. And I look at her and I'm like, how did you remember how to do that? She's like, well, I looked it up. I go, I probably could have looked it up too, but you did that in like 5 minutes. I don't understand.
Well, a lot of what kids do at school, even teenagers, right, in mathematics is more like learning arithmetic and computation and formulae type situations, which is less mathematical. There's some steps missing to make it mathematics. Like, where does this formula come from? I don't really think you should teach anyone to use the quadratic equation without showing them how to derive it from ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Show them where it comes from.
Okay, we're totally out of time here. So
I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault. It's my fault. I'm the host here. I'm supposed to manage time. I'm not doing my job. Okay. If anybody wants to talk to you after listening to this, and we'll get this in the show notes as well, what's the best way for someone to reach out?
Okay, so they can email me. I maintain a couple of email addresses, but I think the best one for this would be Vanessa at Axiomista, AXIOMISTA.com. I'm on Twitter. It's semi-technical there. What else? I think I'm on most major social media stuff as Axiomista.
Twitter and email is fine. That's good. That's good. Twitter's good. Okay, we are done here. So Vanessa, thank you for spending all this time with us today. I really appreciate it. I didn't know their full backstory, so this was good for me too.
Yeah. It's so funny. I don't think I've told those things as a cohesive story ever. So that's really interesting. It's in real life, it's like a lot more there. There's a lot more space where there's a lot of uncertainty or nothing's really happening, and then things happen. So cohesively, it sounds very mobile. But
well, obviously, there's a lot of unknowns as you're going through those transitions, but what I want people to hear from these stories is if you're in one of these unknown spaces, is not to give up and to keep moving forward and leverage those relationships. And there's going to be that better day coming. It's just you got to fight through it, right?
You made me think about something mentorship related that I thought you might enjoy, which is like there are people who do mentorship there are a lot of people who are interested in mentorship. They're interested in being mentors. But then when they talk to their students, they talk to them like they talk to themselves. And maybe the way that they talk to themselves isn't super healthy. So I occasionally will like watch someone meeting a student and they immediately start front loading their conversation with discouraging things, like, oh, it's really hard. Like this company will throw out any application where you don't have a college degree. Like I would recommend you finish that first, and you need to have at least a project, like a full project that you built yourself in this space, and things like that. Without, I think it's important to share the difficulty that people can encounter, but without making it discouraging, like giving it sort of a happy ending thing so that people have something to look forward to. So like I met a woman, I was teaching a workshop for a local meetup about it was like an introduction to data structures and algorithms. And I met a woman who was in Ada, and she wanted to brush up on those things because she was about to do interviewing. And we became friends. And she graduated from Ada Developers Academy, which is a pretty prestigious boot camp where there's an internship built into it. It's a year-long program. It's very well respected. But it took her over 2 years to find her first full-time software developer position, which is actually not that common coming out of Ada. But it wasn't necessarily reflective of her skill level. It was just kind of the way things were shaking out at that time. Maybe the companies that she was applying to were smaller and had fewer openings. Maybe what she emphasized in her interview wasn't necessarily what people were looking for or whatever. But eventually she found a good role for herself, and really just by tenacity. A lot of people interview for a year and give up. And, it's definitely not the norm in my experience to see people have to fight for years for that first role, but it's not unusual, and it's not a reflection of her ability. I mean, she's been a software engineer for 5 years now.
Yeah, it took me in 1992 8 months to get my first job, and I have a nephew who graduated from Ironhack at the end of the year, and he's thrown his resume out there, and we keep tweaking the resume. And I told him, don't give up. I don't care how long this takes, right? Just, it's going to happen. It's just, don't give up. So it's the same thing. And I love this story because I want to share it with him, that this woman, it didn't happen overnight, but it happened, right? So
she's doing great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think she might make more money than me. She's awesome.
That's brilliant.
No, yeah. It's good to have a plan. You know what they say about plans, right? I'm going to poorly paraphrase the quote, but it's something like that they're what is it? Planning is essential, but plans are useless. Something like that.
I don't know if I know that one. The one I always recite is like dream in years, plan in months, and live each day.
Yes, oh, that's a very similar concept. So yeah, the idea, I guess, is that like making a plan is the part that matters. The actual plan itself is not going to go off like you think.
Yeah, not 100%.
But making a plan is good, you know, to work on projects, however small, you know, like try to have some impact, like be brave. Like community is huge. For me, I felt advantaged by my willingness to engage with community in Seattle, and sort of, you know, interact with strangers. um, in general, like the Go community is super welcoming, and that feeds back into itself. It made me want to be super welcoming to people once I wasn't the newest person in the room.
Yeah, and the relationships that you met along the way helped. And
Absolutely.
your job is to pass that forward when those opportunities present themselves for you to do that. So
Exactly. Exactly. We've got to remember that, you know, even though, yes, I didn't attend a boot camp or, you know, do anything formally in a way like that. And, you know, you know, I've gotten all of my jobs in the regular way. I also feel like it's important to recognize that like nobody does anything all by themselves. You know, I had a lot of supporters and a lot of encouragers, and yeah, it's the only thing that like that you can do to perpetuate that is to be that yourself when you can.
I think that's a young idea. I've had to tell each one of my kids at some point, like, no, Dad, I want to do it on my own. I go, you can't
No
do it
such
on your
thing.
own.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want my help. That's fine. But you need help. There's just no way around this. And at some point they finally get it, right? Like 19 years old isn't going to get that. So fine, you struggle. But at some point, as you get a little older, you realize you got to ask for help.
Yeah, there's real value to that. I mean, there's such huge value to having other people who know you and other people you know, and people you can go to with a problem, and people who can come to you with the problem. You know, to that's it's good for learning. It's good for, you know, times of discomfort. It's good for times of comfort, like or like times of positivity. You know, if you need help with something, say you're starting a company, who do you go to? The people you know. You know.
We are twice out of time now.
I
So
know, but thank you. I had a
but
fun time.
I do appreciate that last story there. I think it's good for people to hear that, especially if they're just starting out, and in the economy that we have right now, in
Yes,
February of
uncertainty.
23, it's even a little bit harder. But I promise everybody that everything runs in cycles. So just give the world another like 3 months, and there's going to be improved by the summer. This is all going to stable
It'll
out
be
and improve
different.
again. I know. I feel it.
It'll be
Okay,
different.
it will
It's
be
always
different.
different. But the only constant is change, right?
The only constant is change. Okay, this is Vanessa and Bill finally signing off at the Ardan Labs podcast. I really appreciate everyone listening to us for this. I think it's almost 2 hours, but I do hope that everybody comes back and sees us again real soon.